It's a real pleasure to have Melissa Dinwiddie join us on the Caring CEO. Welcome, Melissa.
So great to be here. Thanks for having me, Graham.
What does care in the workplace mean to you?
Yes, care in the workplace really means treating people like human beings first, before job titles, before KPIs. It's really about creating a culture where people feel seen and safe and supported. And I always say innovation can't happen in a vacuum of fear. Play and risk taking, which are two cornerstones of innovation, require psychological safety. So caring isn't just soft, like we talk about soft skills, it is strategic.
Very much is. There's some very good evidence that supports that. You may be aware that Gallup measure engagement and discretionary effort. And one of the statements they have is my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. And they all
Mm.
strongly agree with that. The higher the productivity, profit, customer service levels. So it's not a nice to have, it's really essential for successful business, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the stories that I hear, I mean, I'm basically a essentially a solo operator. I have an assistant, but it's me in my business. But I can talk separately about this other endeavor where I'm working with a team. But I hear all the time from people like my husband, who is an employee in a big corporation, and I have lots of friends who are in similar situations. And whenever I hear stories about people who leave their jobs, it always comes down to a human issue. It's not because of, their salary wasn't big enough or they didn't have good enough benefits or whatever. It's always some human issue that comes down to some kind of toxicity in the workplace, or they didn't feel cared about, right? So, or like my husband was laid off a couple months ago, and that was a case of not being cared about by the humans in his workplace because he was in a great situation with his team, but the corporation didn't care about the humans, and they just, let go of 8% of their workforce. So there you go.
Yeah, that's a massive cut, isn't it? Very hard for it. And I guess it is a signal of just how much uncertainty and rapid change there is in the workplace now. When you work with teams, how do you help them to cope better with uncertainty and to feel more confident and feel more supportive? What sort of things do you do to help create that?
Yeah, and you're so right. Now is a time of just profound uncertainty. I mean, that's just sort of the human experience, of course. There's never really such a thing as total certainty, but we are living in a time of profound uncertainty. And, I really rely on my improv training. I started doing improv about really just about a dozen years ago. So it hasn't been that tremendously long. But I tell you, that is one of the greatest gyms for life. And in fact, a colleague of mine, a mentor of mine, calls improv the gym for life. When you yeah, when you practice the skills that enable teams of people, groups of people, small groups of people, to get up on stage and create essentially a work product in front of a paying audience, a customer, on the fly. That there's nothing like that to train your ability to think on the fly, to think on your feet, to communicate. Improv teams are known for incredible communication skills because you have to have your partner's back at all times,
Mm.
and incredible listening skills, all the skills that you need for leadership. Improv trains all of those so-called soft skills. I hate that term, but the human skills that we need to be, effective leaders, effective communicators of all kinds. So I really lean into that.
I can imagine, and I don't like the term soft skills either. And I'm not sure where I heard this, but heard someone else call them strong skills, and I
Mhm.
really, really love that because they are the skills that make or break a team or a division or an organization. They make a massive difference. Last year, I did a introductory course to improv, and I must say, I did really enjoy it, and it was an amazing experience to be taken from a group of strangers who never met each other before to, I think it was the end of 6 weeks, really knowing a lot about each other and about their personalities and just being able to support them. There are some really wonderful life skills there that you really have to put into action very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's really profound. I was leading a session for a leadership course that's run by the city where I live, that I went through this program last year, and they brought me in this year to lead a session on essentially how to present their class projects more effectively. And I was talking about, I talk about this actually a lot with people who tell me that they're afraid of doing an improv course. And I was telling this class of 24 folks from all walks of life that, if you're having a conversation with somebody, you're improvising. And unless you're hilarious,
True.
you are improvising. And the only difference between, everybody else and performing improvisers like myself is that performing improvisers just practice the skills that we need to get up on stage and make up things on the fly. We just practice those skills. So we get more facile at them, but everybody improvises all day long.
Of course.
And yeah, we all do it.
Yeah, definitely. I saw in your background that, you have a long history in the arts. Would you mind just letting our listeners know about where you started, where you were involved, and how you now have become an innovation strategist? I think that background would be helpful.
Yes. Well, as you saw from my background, my path has been anything but linear. I started as a Juilliard-trained dancer, and then I became a professional calligrapher and artist for 15 years. That's how I made my living. And I was also a jazz singer and performed and toured a little bit as a singer-songwriter. I have been an improv performer. And somewhere along the line, I realized that the creative tools that I had used to overcome my own inner critic and creative blocks, perfectionist paralysis, and all of those, those things that keep us stuck, all of those creative tools that I'd figured out were exactly what corporate teams needed to break out of creative ruts. So now I help teams at companies like Google and Meta and Salesforce use play and creativity to unlock innovation and improve communication. And I also wrote this book that you can see because we're on video here, called The Creative Sandbox Way, which outlines it outlines the 10 steps that I figured out to help myself get out of creative stuck. And those steps, those 10, I call them guideposts, went on to inform the framework that I now teach, my Create the Impossible framework, which is play hard, make crap, learn fast. And that's basically a repeatable process that allows people to get past their blocks.
We'll go into that in a little bit in a minute, but all that artistic, creative career that you had, you mentioned that it was part of play. Play was an important part in learning from that and apply it in a business situation. What else did you learn from that background in the creative arts to bring to the business world?
Well, what's been so interesting is, so Graham, after I pivoted from being a full-time professional artist, there was a period where I was making my living as a professional artist and then also helping other people get creatively unstuck as a creativity instigator. So I kind of had two things going on at the same time because I had gotten so burned out making my living as an artist and had to figure out how to get back to making art for my own fulfillment and enjoyment. And that's what led to these 10 guideposts that helped me get past my own creative block. And then discovering that what helped me helped other people. And that's what ultimately led to the book and this sort of second business, helping other people get creatively unstuck. And then realizing that this would be, beneficial for organizations, for teams, for groups in the, in the corporate space. And what was really interesting is when I made that pivot, first of all, it telling about it now, it seems like, oh, I just went from this, I went from A to B to C. It actually was not that easy because I didn't come from a corporate background, I didn't have a network in the corporate world, and I didn't have any experience in that world, and I didn't know anything about selling in the B2B space. So it was kind of like climbing Mount Everest.
Yeah.
I had to get to base camp, which in and of itself is quite a climb, right? So and I had a lot of imposter complex. So I had to get past all of this mental gunk in my head about, who's going to buy from me? What am I doing? How do I do all this? So that was quite a challenge. And then I also, interestingly, part of that journey was working with essentially kind of a coach who helped me in this, learning how to sell as a, very small business into big companies. And one of the things that this person that I worked with said at the time was, it's great that you come from this non-corporate background. You bring, this very different perspective. It's great that you're a creative. So this person really tried to validate my background as a benefit that I was, bringing instead of a deficit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they said, you're going to have to wear a suit, which of course isn't true, but there's something about that message that lodged in my brain and sort of hooked into my imposter complex and made me believe a story that I made up in my own head that I had to somehow closet away who I was, that I couldn't really show up fully as my creative self. So what happened, Graham, is that I never talked about the fact that I was a Juilliard-trained dancer. I didn't talk about the fact that I had a 15-year career as a visual artist. I didn't talk about the fact that I had been a jazz singer. I didn't talk about any of these things. And I just sort of, I didn't show up as myself it was about 6 years. And I was starting to get really kind of burned out in this business that I had, been growing. And it took me a long time to realize what was happening. And so about a year ago, I realized, I really need to integrate these two sides. I still had this list of people who had been following me as a creative and a creativity instigator that I was never emailing to because I didn't have time. And then I had this list that I was slowly growing as, my consultancy, this new business that I was putting all of my time and attention on. But I didn't feel like I was showing up really as myself to them. I was showing up as sort of like, I'm a communications person, but that's not what I was trained in school. That just happens to be what I had been hired to do during the pandemic. And I felt kind of like a fraud. And so finally, at some point, I don't know, it took a while, but eventually with enough, I don't know, feedback from people that I trusted in my life, coaches and other people, I realized that I really needed to reclaim who I really am.
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of work on that over the past year or so. yeah, it was about a year ago when I made the decision that to make speaking a big part of my business
Yeah.
and to show up fully as the creative, the multifaceted creative that I am. Um, and I don't know that I answered your actual question in that.
Now that's, we have talked about lots of things there, which is what I was hoping for. But where did you get your first paid corporate gig? When did you get money in the bank from working for an organization away from the arts per se?
Yeah, I think the first paid gig actually was Uber. I think it was a day long. It was sort of a presentation communication workshop where I incorporated some Lego Serious Play, which they specifically contacted me about,
Mm.
and some improv activities. And it was a combination of data scientists and I believe some engineers. I can't remember which different departments they were all from.
And that's a big leap, in terms of what you've done before to, doing that work with that group with a very different skill set. What did they just Google about Lego blocks, or how did they find you?
Yeah, so that was interesting. They had contacted me like a year before that, specifically about Lego Serious Play, which is a methodology that I had been trained in 2017. And not long after, I have multiple certifications in Lego Serious Play, and they somebody at Uber had Googled Lego Serious Play because they had a friend who knew about it. Or I don't remember how they found out about Lego Serious Play. They did a Google search, found me because I was local, phoned me or emailed me through my website, and ended up not hiring me at that point. They ended up going with somebody else who was, I don't know, less expensive or something. I can't remember. But I found out later when they came back to me, it was maybe several months or a year later or something. They came back to me, and I ended up getting the scoop from the contact. It was a different person who contacted me, but from the same team, that they had hired some person to give a talk on, I don't remember. It was something, and nobody really liked it. And they hired me for more money than my original ask. So it all worked out.
Fabulous. You spoke briefly before about the Create the Impossible framework. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? You mentioned there were 3 steps before, but yeah, just like a bit more background about those 3 elements of the impossible framework.
Yeah. So the Create the Impossible framework is a repeatable process that really helps people get past blocks. And it's the 3 steps that might sound deceptively simple, but as we all know, sometimes the most powerful tools are really the most simple. So step 1 is play hard. And this is not, work hard, play hard, or go to Vegas and get wild. This just means to embrace your inner 4-year-old. It means to be open to experimentation and play, follow your curiosity. This is, when we're in the mind space of being like a little kid, little kids don't care about winning awards, or is it good enough, or is it, am I going to make money from it? They're just experimenting. They're seeing, oh, what would happen if I tried this? And that's the mind space that we want to be in when we're trying out new ideas. And we want to just think quantity, not quality. That's one of my guideposts from my Creative Sandbox Way book as well. So that's step 1. And you can apply this in, you can go to my YouTube account or go to my blog. Every week I put out a new article with an accompanying video talking about the framework and how it applies in just so many different areas.
Yeah.
So that's step 1 is play hard. Step 2 is make crap. And this is very intentional. So one of the things that happens is that keeps us stuck is that we get so mired in the idea that everything we produce has to be amazing.
Yeah.
That everything has to be, excellent, perfect, right out of the gate. And that is paralyzing.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do is lower the bar down, not just to the ground, but below the ground. We need to allow ourselves to make crap, allow ourselves to suck, which is really hard when we have trained all our lives for excellence.
To be great.
To be great. Of course we want to be great. We all want to be great.
Yeah.
But in order to be great, in order to unsuck, in order to be excellent, we have to first allow ourselves to make crap.
Absolutely.
And so that very, very intentionally allow ourselves to make crap. So that's step number 2.
Yeah.
Just let yourself produce a lot of crap. Step number 3 is learn fast. So you play hard, you make a lot of crap, and then you learn from it.
Yeah.
Let every experience be a growth opportunity.
Yeah. Yep.
And this is a constant cycle. So it's very simple, but if you are constantly allowing yourself to go through this cycle and be aware and mindful of where you are in this cycle, you become unstoppable, and it will lead to more breakthroughs and innovations. And I have a visual on my website that shows it as it looks like a like a corkscrew, like a sort of a rainbow colored corkscrew that leads to breakthroughs and innovations. And it is a repeatable cycle. And here's the thing, this is what my keynote is about, is that, it's so easy to believe that overcoming blocks, overcoming any kind of, whether it's a creative block or any other kind of block, that it's a one and done sort of thing, that overcoming any kind of limiting belief, oh, great, done. But that's not how it works. We have to continually challenge whatever our stuckness is, whatever our blocks are. And it's actually the process of continually challenging those blocks, whatever it is that's getting in our way, that is what is going to lead to breakthrough innovation.
Yeah. I remember reading about this experiment, and I can't remember who put it together, but essentially, every group was given, a set of 15 things, sort of straight rulers, round this, round that. And the idea was to build the highest structure, using these 15 things. And I think I'm recalling correctly, but the slowest and the worst was senior leadership, working together, because they're so much into planning and looking at hypotheticals and all this sort of stuff. And the fastest were school kids, because they learnt by doing. and rather than trying to find the perfect one, they kept on trying things, but they often got the highest thing. So when you are working with people who are used to being right, who are very deliberate in how they make decisions, and they're the leaders of a group, how do you get them to change their perspective? How do you get them to be open to playing hard, making crap, and learning fast?
Well, the logistics of it, when I go in and I work with a team, whether it's a leadership team or a team of researchers, it's the same. How I go in and I work with teams, I use play-based activities, typically drawn from the world of improv, or sometimes they're Lego Serious Play activities, but they're almost always play-based. And why do I use play? Play is, first of all, it's an equalizer, and it's a connector, and it loosens people up. Now, do I get pushback? Sometimes I do. Sometimes, and if I get too much pushback, then obviously it's not going to be the right group for me to work with. Sometimes I have people who are like, well, we're not going to play. And if those are the people who are, who I'm dealing with, then they're not going to bring me in. But if I have a contact, if I have somebody who's advocating for my work, then they'll bring me in, and if they see my client list and they see the transformation that I create, then they'll be open-minded enough to bring me in. Interestingly, it is often the leaders who are the most resistant at first, but they're the ones who see the value in it.
Yeah.
And experience the most transformation. So it is really interesting to see. And here's the thing, what people hear play and they think frivolous, unimportant, or they think recess.
Yeah.
And that's not at all
Yeah.
what I'm doing when I go in and I work with teams and organizations. What I'm doing is strategic and transformational. So I'm never going in and I'm like, okay, we're going to have a recess and we're just going to have fun together. That's not what I do. Do we have fun? Hell yeah. We have a lot of fun. But what we're doing through the fun is incredibly transformational. And there's so much dot connecting. And I'm never doing an activity that is just, quote unquote, just for fun. There's always something incredibly strategic to the activity. So let me give you an example. Here's I do a lot of work around communication. I do a lot of work around what I call the 3 C's: connection, communication, and creativity, because that is the Venn diagram, the intersection of those 3 C's is where innovation lies. It's really hard to have breakthrough innovation if any one of those 3 C's is broken in your organization. You're gonna have a hard time having breakthrough innovations happening. Yeah. So I do a lot of work around communication and helping teams communicate for greater influence and impact.
Yeah.
So one of the activities that I do a lot of is, in order to help teams communicate with others who don't necessarily have the same kinds of expertise that they do, same kind of context that they do. This is really common. So for example, I've worked with a lot of researchers inside of Facebook or Meta. They come from a very academic background. They are used to communicating with other researchers, and they speak sort of researchese.
Yeah.
And when they talk to people who are not researchers, it's like they're speaking Greek to somebody who's Italian, right? So how do you teach them to communicate with their cross-functional teammates in a way that their cross-functional teammates are going to understand? So I use this activity I call the time traveler. I pair people up. Partner A is from the present time. Everything's normal for them. Partner B is a time traveler from 500 years ago. So we have a little conversation before I break people into their pairs about what would be different for this person from 500 years ago. It's 1525. So how is life different? So we, do a little, quite a bit, right? We do a little popcorn share. Oh, there's no electricity. There's no cars. People are riding horses instead of cars, things like that, right? Maybe they didn't have running water, or, whatever. There's no modern medicine, just popcorn shares about how life is different, right? Then I send them off to the breakout rooms and I say, partner A, your cell phone, imagine that your cell phone has just gone off. Your job is to explain what your cell phone is to your time traveling partner. But here's a catch. Remember that your time traveling partner, there's a high likelihood they're going to think you're a witch. So in addition to explaining what this device is, you also have to convince them not to condemn you to burn at the stake as a witch.
Yeah.
So you have 2 minutes to do this.
Yeah.
Now, it is an impossible task. I've done it myself. Periodically I have to partner with somebody if there's not an even number in the room or whatever. And it makes people laugh, and it's really hard. We come back together and I ask people how many witches are in the room. Half the room always raises their hands because it's impossible. And then we talk about, okay, so time travelers, is there anything that your partner did that was effective? And so that bubbles up, and invariably somebody used an analogy
Mm,
that
mm,
made sense to the time traveler.
mm,
Aha. So people start connecting dots. So then we switch roles, and I send them off again with a slightly different task. This time it's not a cell phone, it's something else. And so now they have a leg up, and they learn from this experience. It's very memorable. It sticks because they had this experience where they got their emotions involved. They were laughing. They were, they don't forget this. And so I
mm.
get feedback and stories, the next week when they come back to the second part of the, multi-week session program. Oh my gosh, I was talking with my cross-functional teammate, trying to explain something to them. It was getting really frustrating. And then I remembered the time traveler exercise. And I realized it's not because they're stupid. It's not because they're being a jerk. I need to find an analogy. I need to think from their point of view. What's their context? What's an analogy that they will understand? And that's my responsibility.
Yeah, I really like that. It's you know, it does force you to think and understand that people are coming from different perspectives, and especially 500 years apart. You mentioned just then that you think your assignments can be multi-week. Does it start off with a problem that the group has and wanting you to help with that problem? Why is the reason? What's some significant reasons you've been brought in, and then how did you go through those weeks to deliver what was required?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. Yes, the answer to that is that yes, my clients will come to me because they have some specific problem, some specific challenge that they need help with. So one of those challenges is often we need to communicate more effectively for greater impact and influence. That's a really common one. Another one that I love to help with is we need to innovate on a timeline. We need to out innovate the competition, and we need help with that. So, I help with the 3 C's so that they can have, more breakthroughs and innovations. Another problem might be we have these brilliant analytical thinkers, but they don't think they're creative. And it's really hard to be creative when you don't think you are.
Mm.
So I can come in and help with that. That's one of my sweet spots, is helping people tap into their creativity and really identify that they are creative, and have that permission to identify as a creative person when they haven't before. So that's another way that I can help.
You've had work with some pretty amazing clients. You mentioned Meta and Uber, Salesforce, Google, Stanford. Was you obviously had success in one area and got recommendations, or people left one company and went to another company? How did your business grow across those multiple, very highly reputable organizations?
Yeah, it has been some of all of the above. Um, it often, business is so much of relationships, so it is often like I got a lot of work inside of Meta because of one initial engagement, and that one went so well that that manager told all of her friends
Mm,
inside of Meta,
mm,
and then I kept getting hired and rehired and rehired and rehired.
mm.
So that was a case of referrals.
Yep.
Uh, and I've gotten work from LinkedIn, and then same thing, then that turns into a referral.
Yeah.
And then there's the random, like the Uber job was just me getting somebody Googled Lego Series Play and then
Yeah.
contacted me through the site. So that happens as well. So it is kind of a variety of different ways that people find me.
Quite often, people can be stuck because of poor relationships, breakdown in relationships, not communicating well, not seeing other groups' perspective, is it the playthings that you do that helps to break down that, or are there other methods or tools you use to address if there could be a stressful relationship between two people out of the group, for example?
Well, that's not really my particular sweet spot. The individual relationship conflicts, that's not the area that I really focus on.
Yep.
If that comes up, then, I'll deal with it in the session, but people don't come to me specifically for, teammate A and teammate B are having an issue. Can you help us with that? That is not really my area. Yeah.
No worries. And, as an innovation strategist, you've applied that to your own life, really, haven't you? You've had so many different careers, from dancing to singing to calligraphy to all sorts of other areas. I always finish by just asking this question, which is, knowing what you know now today, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self? So, as an innovation strategist, what advice would you give someone who has just started becoming a dancer?
Oh my gosh. Well, when I think back to when I was a dancer, I was so obsessed with dance, and to the degree that I did not want to do kind of anything else. I would not say that it was really healthy. So what I would say to my 20-year-old self is, and actually I got injured, and that was the end of my dance career. And I spent 5 years really on the quest for the miracle cure. So what I would say to her is, I know you don't believe this now, but things are going to get better, and you are going to discover so much joy and richness in your life that I know this feels like the worst thing in the world has just happened. And there's no way you can believe this right now, but life is actually going to get better and more rich because this just happened.
Yeah.
That's what I would say to her.
Well, that's fantastic advice for all of us. We think, because we all have our ups and downs, our setbacks, our adversity, and all that sort of thing. And it's really a lovely common theme that I get, sort of asking people that question, not to take myself so seriously, just to know that, keep doing the right thing each day, and things will unfold. But we do agonize a lot about the present moment, don't we? I remember I had Amy Edmondson on the podcast here, and she is famous for psychological safety and her work there. But she said, I've always strived to do great work and often got really worried about things. And she said, I wish I'd asked myself, what do I need to learn? What do I need to learn to address that? And it's the same thing, isn't it? Just being in the present moment and being open to new avenues, new options, new directions.
I wish I would have been more open to new avenues and options when I was 20, and instead of being kind of stuck in a holding pattern for 5 years. Well, whatever, it led me to where I am now. So
It's been a real pleasure catching up, Melissa, and thank you so much for being part of the Caring CEO.
thank you so much for having me, Graham. This has been a real pleasure for me as well.
And you've got something to share with our listeners, is that right?
I do. Yes, I have an impact innovation checklist, which will help people actually take action and get creative, uh, basically in 10 minutes. It's something that you can use every day. And the link for that is bit.ly/caring CEO thank you, all one word, all lowercase.
Fabulous. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you.